And we're back to freecodecamp. It's the second section in the JavaScript curriculum. Right here it's called ES6. Let's go over it. It's a little bit shorter, it's only like 26 or whatever it was. But all of the tasks there are a little bit more complex. So it's going to take us an hour or something. We'll see. Let us first check this example where we compare scopes of the var and the let keywords. So depending on local and global scope, it makes a difference if you use let or var to declare your variables. In this first example you can see 0, 1 and 2 will be stored in num array with the for loop, and 3 will be stored in the I variable. In the second example, it's the same, but R is declared outside of the for loop, so it has global scope now instead of local, and this may cause issues. You can see that right here in the third example. The console will only display 3 because this is the global value that was given to the variable I. So it may cause issues here and there depending on what variable type you use and if you have them set or declared globally or locally. As always, read through it yourself and then check my solution for it if you get stuck. We've got a fourth example right here, where we've used the let instead of the var to declare our variable I. And I will be set to is not defined. In the end, unprint num2 will be equal to 2 in this example. Let me read over what we actually have to do on the right hand side. Okay, we've got a variable I in the first line right here under function scope. And we want to declare I in the if statement, so locally it's meant to be a different thing. And we want to make sure that we don't use var, so var, to declare our variable. So we'll have to change it to let. This is the function scope, so it's part of the check scope function. And within the if statement, we'll declare a new variable, let I, which is the block scope, so this is local scope, and the first one was global scope. And this should solve the first task. Let's go to mutate an array declared with const. We've had that in the previous course section where we've gone over the basics in JavaScript. You can declare a variable or an array once like this here in the first line, const s equals 567. But you can't then directly mutate it by writing s equals 123. This is going to result in an error. So if you want to mutate it, you need to address every single index position of the array and then set this to the value. Here the third line s index 2 equals 45, so the 7 will be changed to 45. And this will give us 5645 for our s array. So if you want to mutate your array that's declared with a const, you will have to mutate the single index positions one by one And that's what we're going to do in this example. So we've got an array that's called S once again with the values 572, and we want to set it to 257. There are always multiple ways to achieve that, but the easiest would be to use the same way of writing that we have in the example. So the third line, S and then the index position. So here it was S index 2 equals 45. So S0 equals 2 now. We can just copy paste it 2 times and then change the values. So index position 1 and 2, and we want to set it to 5 and 7. And now it should be good. And we can move on to prevent object mutation. So there's a freeze function that we can use, and it prevents objects from getting mutated. So the example, we've got an object simply called obj, and we apply object.freeze to obj, and therefore we can't change the review to bad or the new prop. So add a new property called test. It doesn't work because we've frozen it. On the right hand side, what are we supposed to do? We're going to use the object.freeze obviously, and we want to prevent the math constants object to be mutated. So we'll simply add it right here. Let's start in line 6. It's object.freeze, and in the parentheses we need the name of our object, in this case math underscore constants. And then we should already be good. So it's the same line as here in the example on the left hand side, but obviously it's then called not obj, it's object.freeze. And therefore we're good here. Let's move on. And now we'll use the arrow functions. So it's a different way of writing functions that was introduced in ES6. It's also called arrow function syntax. So the example on the left hand side, the first one is the same as the second one, and it's also the same as the third one. So this way of writing is just shorter, and in many ways it gives you a better overview. Let us change on the right hand side our function. So magic will store a function. Let's change it to const magic. Then we need the parentheses, the arrows, so it's an equal sign and is greater than sign. And let me check it. We don't need these brackets. And we wanna return new date. So not just the date function, instead it should be new and then date function. And now we're good here. You can also use parameters when you use this arrow way of writing for functions. So let's check the first example, const doubler. It uses item as a parameter, and item is then doubled. So if you call doubler with a value of 4, you get 4 for the item, the parameter, times 2, which results in 8. So it's much quicker or much easier, and I think it's a better overview to just write it like this. you've got item, for example, given already, and you don't have to write return item times 2. Instead, use this arrow way of writing. Let us check what we have to do here. We need my const, and it should store a function with 2 parameters. So we can get rid of this part here. Array1 and array2 are our parameters, so we can keep that in a parenthesis. Then we use our equal sign and greater than sign. And now we should be fine here. So in the example we've got 1, 2, which is array 1, and 3, 4, 5, which is array 2. And a concatenation, it just changes these 2 values and make it a new array. The next task is set default parameters for your functions. So you can do that as well in this arrow syntax. Whenever a parameter doesn't have a value or no argument is passed, there should be a default value for this parameter given. In the example on the left hand side we've got the name, so this is the parameter, and in the first console log greeting John is passed to this parameter, so greeting would store hello John. And in the second example it doesn't have anything set as the name, so anonymous will then be added, therefore hello anonymous will be the second console log. So whenever the argument is undefined, the parameter will be set to the default value, in this case anonymous. We want to do something similar on the right hand side. We need our function increments. We'll add default values. So that will add 1 to number. So value equals 1 needs to be added. So when you call this and you don't pass an argument, value will always be 1. Now we're already good. Let's move on to use the rest parameter with function parameters. So the rest parameter, you can simply see them as these 3 dots. In this example we've got our args, so the arguments and the 3 dots before it. In the first example we've got 3 arguments, and in the second example we've got string, null, then this array of numbers and an empty object, so it's 4 arguments. And this is what the dot 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 does. You can also use it to spread out contents of an object or array. Let us go over the example on the right hand side. Let me first read it. What have we got here? Modify the function sum using the rest parameter in such a way that the function sum is able to take any number of arguments and return a sum. Alright, so x, y, z are our parameters here. And everything that we need to do is just to look at the arguments that might be passed and then put them right here into the parentheses, and before it we need the dot dot dot, so you could say spread them out. And then add them together. But inside we want to add a for loop, so let me get rid of this part. Let me define the total. I'll set it to 0. And I'll use a for loop. Let I equal 0. Then I smaller our args.length. And then obviously I++. So for every index position we want to add it to total, so total plus equals. args, and then the I for the index position. And this should solve this task. So total plus equals is the same as total equals total plus args at the given index position. And obviously my mistake, we want to return the total in the end, so I forgot that. But now we're good. Use the spread operator to evaluate arrays in place. So we've used this ... before, and here it is again. Just look at the second example on the left hand side, and you can see that it's going to spread out the content of the ARR array, and then we can find the maximum of it, in this case 89. So you can spread out the content of an array, in this case using this ... operator. We want to copy all contents of ARR1 into another array, ARR2. So how can we do that? We've got our ARR1, which is January to May. So it has 5 values, 5 strings. We want to store that in ARR2. So we can simply check this line on the left hand side. It's the same here, ... and then ARR1. And this is already what we need. Use the Destructuring assignment to extract values from objects. So again, we can use this new ES6. It's not that new, but it's definitely new compared to what we've done so far in the basic freecodecamp course. We can use that to simplify code. For example, here we don't have to use the ES5 way of writing it to assign name and age of the user object to these variables. We can simply write it like this. So right here in ES6, it's way shorter and it gives you a better overview once again. In this case, we need to replace the 2 assignments with an equivalent Destructuring assignment. So we have today and tomorrow as the variables. So let's write it like this. We need our high temperatures object. And inside of our curly brackets, right here, we want to set today and tomorrow, our new variables, to the values that the object has. So we can simply delete these 2 lines and replace it with this. Next task, use the Destructuring assignment to assign variables from objects. So it's again the same that we've done before, but this time we're going to use different variable names. So we're going to create new variables and assign values of the object on the left hand side user to these new variables. So username is the new variable and it will get the name John Doe, and user age would be 34 if you write it like this. Let's check the right hand side. We have high today and high tomorrow as new variables, and still high temperatures is our object. So let me copy paste this. The property is still today and tomorrow, so we want to set today to high today, and tomorrow will be set to high tomorrow. And this should be the solution. Let me delete these 2 lines. In this case, high today would now be 77, and height tomorrow would be 80. Use destructuring assignment to assign variables from nested objects. So yet again the same game, but this time the object is a little bit more complex as it has a nested object inside. So user, then the John Doe object is part of the user object. Properties are age and email. And you can write it like this in ES6. So for example, you want to set user age to 34 or user email to johndoe@freecodecamp.com. We've got a local forecast, nested object. We use const and set it to this object. And the new variables that we want to store. The values in are load today and high today. Low and high are both part of the today object, which is part of the local forecast object. So we'll use today right here. Use curly brackets afterwards. And inside we'll add our new variables. So low today and high today, and set them to low and high. So with this new way of writing, low today would now be 64 and high today would be 77. Use destructuring assignment to assign variables from arrays. So in the example, A and B will be set to 1 and 2. And if we look at the second example, we've got A, B, and a couple of commas, and then C. And this would result in A equals 1, B equals 2, and C should equal, let me count, it should be 5. So 3 and 4 are omitted by these commas. And therefore C will be set to the 5th value, so the 5th index position, and this has the value 5. In this case, we just want to swap A and B. So we want to set A to B and B to A. And you just write it like this. So A, B equals B, A. But don't add a constant to it. You've already declared that in the first line with the let. So you don't need that. So this would result in an error. Now we're good. Destructuring via rest elements. So here's the ... again. Check out the first example on the left, const AB. So this will be set to A equals 1, B equals 2, but the rest, 3, 4, 5, 7, will be put into ARR. So the third line, console log ARR, will display 3, 4, 5, 7. So on the right hand side, what do we need to do? Use a destructuring assignment with the rest syntax to emulate the behavior. Okay, the first two elements should be omitted. So we'll check it right here. We've got our const shorter list. And the first two elements should be omitted, and the rest will be stored in it. So we use these brackets, and then we can write it like so. So A will be set to 1, B will be set to 2, and the rest will be stored in shorter list. And that should work. Use destructuring assignment to pass an object as a function's parameters. So let's check the example first. So we can make this shorter once again in ES6. Just like so. It makes things easier to read. And again, you can see how this simplifies the code and makes it easier to read and gives it a better overview. On the right hand side, what do we need? We've got our half function, and we want to have max and min as the parameters. Okay. So the way to do it should be const half equals, and then inside of the parentheses we need max and min, which is the same as here. So let me add these curly brackets. And then we don't need the stats anymore. So we can delete that for max and min right here. Let's go to create strings using template literals. Let's check the example first. Our object is person. Greeting will be hello, my name is, and then person.name, which is Zodiac Hasbro. And then I am person.age, in this case 56. So you can use this $sign, this way of writing, to add variables or values of object properties in this case. Keep in mind that these are not regular quotation marks. These are these angled quotation marks or these accent marks. It's also called backticks. You can find them on my keyboard on the top right next to the delete key. Let's check our example on the right hand side where we want to use this new way of writing. So we've got an array list of list item elements. They all have the same class. They all have the closing tag, but inside there's a different value for each. So one way of solving this task would be to go here. We've got our const failure items, and we can use a for loop, for example. We use a counter again, I equals 0, smaller than array length and I++. So it's a basic for loop that we need. We use arr.length because this is the array, the parameter that's used for the makeList function. And we want to use failure items, so the new variable that we've created in the line before our for loop. We want to push the content of the arr to it. What we need to be careful here, the list items, the opening closing tag and the class is always the same. So we can use our backticks right here. And then we can copy paste the most part of this. as this is all the same in all 3 lines, but no var on top and line break are different. So here we need our ARR with an index position of I, so use the $, then the curly brackets. Just like here in the example where we've used person.name and person.age, but in this case we need the ARR with an index position of I. So if you look above right here for failure, no var on top and line break are used, and this is what we need. So when this function is called in the last line, line 17, it's result.failure, and this is why we know that we're going to use these 3 values, so no var on top and line break. And this should be the solution. Let me check it. I didn't make any typos, so we can move on to write concise object literal declarations using object property shorthand. So again, ES6 makes code a little bit shorter. So we can just set X to X and Y to Y for the mouse position with this shorter 1-liner instead of this 4-liner on top. Let's do this for name, age, and gender in this example as well. So these are our parameters. And we can basically use the same way of writing it for the get mouse position. In this case, we can simply delete name, age, and gender right here. And now the code should work. So next task. Again, we can shorten things. So we've gotten rid here in the example on the left hand side of the function keyword. And we want to do the same for the setCar function on the right hand side. So we can delete the function keyword right here. And then we're already good. Next task is use class syntax to define a constructor function. Again, read through it yourself. I don't want to bore you by reading all of this to you. And after you've read it, try to solve it. If you can't, check out my solution. So on the right hand side, we want to use the class keyword to write a constructor to create the vegetable class. So we use class vegetable, curly brackets, then the constructor with a parameter of name, and set this name to name. And now caret uses this new function, so the class vegetable that we've created with the argument caret, and therefore caret becomes the name, and when we print it out console.log caret.name, it's now caret. So this is how you can solve this task. Now we've got getters and setters. If you're a total beginner, don't worry too much about these concepts. You're going to use them over and over, and then it becomes more clearer what it all is and how you can use it. For now it's just about understanding the syntax and the way of writing it. But I'm pretty sure that even freecodecamp uses this stuff more in future course sections, and I've planned to make more tutorials myself on JavaScript in the future as well. So we're going to get over this time and time again. My solution for this would be like so. I create a new class, thermostat, use the constructor with our parameter, then the curly brackets. In this case we want to use Fahrenheit as our parameter. And in the class we use getter and setter. So we can look at the example. So we'll set this dot and then Fahrenheit to Fahrenheit. And we want to get the temperature and set return this dot and then Fahrenheit. And here's the formula given. So we want to multiply this by 5 divided by 9 and then minus 32. We put this into parentheses. Let me actually write it the way it is written in the example, so an underscore is used. So I'll add that here as well, so that I don't confuse you. And these parentheses aren't really needed, but you can better see what the f is when I do this. So let me add them. Now we'll add the setter. It's temperature again. And this time we want to use a Celsius as a parameter. And the formula for that is also given. So when we use this underscore Fahrenheit, we want to set it to the formula. So C is for Celsius, then multiplied by 9.0 divided by 5 plus 32. But in this case we don't need parentheses here. For 5 plus 32, we'll just keep it like this. But this should be the solution. So we'll get a Fahrenheit temperature and we can turn it into Celsius by doing this. And I didn't make any typos. That's great. We can go to create a module script. And now we're getting back to, you could say, web development. If you've checked out some web code yourself, you've certainly seen the script tag. So this can be put into your HTML, usually your index.html. And then you can put JavaScript code inside. I believe we haven't yet used that in freecodecamp, but here it's introduced. So you can place it right here inside of a body. We need the script opening and closing tag. As a type, it's set to the value module. And src is for the source. So just like we did for images, for example, we have to define a source for it. And index.js is given here as a value. Let's move on. We're going to export to share a code block. You may have seen export specifically when it comes to functions. I've used it, for example, in my exorcism playlist a lot. So it's yet another keyword that can be used to export. In this case, an addition. So X and Y are added and this result is then exported. On the right hand side, we want to use it as well. So all that we have to do is add this keyword right here. So this would be one way to do it. The second way would be to write it in line 9 and then use this function name. So both is valid and both allows you to pass this test. Let's go to reuse JavaScript code using import. So when you can export code, you can also import it. So the example, we've got add imported, and then there's just defined where we want to import it from. In this case, the math_functions.js. So let us do this right here. In the first code line, we want to import yet another keyword. What is it that we want to import? We want to use the uppercase string and lowercase string functions. And the directory it is stored in is also given it's a string_functions.js. But before it we need the keyword from. You can import everything from a file with this star icon. It's almost the same way of writing. Let's go over it on the right hand side. So at first we'll use our keyword import, then the star icon for importing everything, Then let me check it, the object is called string functions, and now we have to define where we want to import it from, and it's also given it's once again string underscore functions.js. So I'll copy paste this right here. And we can move on to create an export fallback with export default. Alright, we want to create a fallback. Let me check what we need here. On the right hand side, we want to add a fallback value. So all that we have to do is to export and then default. So we'll have to use these new keywords. Are we good? Now we want to import a default export. So add, in this case, our default export on the left hand side in the example. And on the right hand side, we want to import the default export math underscore functions.js. So let me check, what do we need on the right hand side? We want to import a default export from math underscore functions.js. I want to give it the name subtract, so we need the keyword import, then the name subtract, and the keyword from, and we've got our folder directory here. So we're good. Let's create a JavaScript promise. So in this example, we've got a new promise, and it uses resolve and reject as parameters. So let us create something similar on the right hand side. So what do we need on the right hand side? We need const and make server request. We need the new keywords and then call it promise, and we need resolve and reject as the parameter. Again, this is also stuff that we're going to use later on. For now, it's about learning how to write this. And for me, the main challenge is to not make any typos here. But now we're good. Let us go to the next one, complete a promise with resolve and reject. So now we're actually going to use this promise. By default, it's always pending, but it can also be fulfilled or rejected. So the last one that we've created was just pending, and now we can use resolve and reject. You can see that here on the left hand side, promise was fulfilled is for resolve and reject. Promise was rejected, and we've got the same outline on the right hand side. Our response from server. If it's true, we want to call the resolve method. We already have our if and else statements. So for the if resolve, we got the data, and if it's false, we need data not received. So this is our reject. Right now we're going to handle a fulfilled promise with then. Alright, we want to add a then method to our promise, and it's for a fulfilled promise. So the result, in this case we got the data. So what we need to add is our make server request dot then and then add results. And we use this error notation. And inside we use the console.log results, and you can see it's fulfilled, so we got the data. So the if statement is true and resolve gives us the string, we got the data. Everything works fine. And now we have a rejected promise. And we'll use the catch method for that. So it's the same that we've used before, but instead of using then, we now use catch. So this is the else case where we use to reject string data not received. So once again, we'll call a make server request, catch, and inside we'll use error. And then console.log inside error. And you can see we've got data not received printed out. So this is for the false case in the if add statement. And I believe we're done here with ES6, at least for now. Let me check the curriculum. Yeah, that should be it. It was 29. I said 26 in the beginning, I believe. So it was 29, almost an hour. But we've got through it. Next up are regular expressions. I'll try to finish this video for next week. But that's enough for ES6. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.